I think the album cover, the artwork, and a vinyl, when you bought that, that was a piece you could hold it, you could look at it, you could tell it was big, you know. When this suddenly went down to the jewel case, to the CD, oh, you know, you couldn't have the detail, you know, because it was too small. You know, I needed one for each eye, you know.
Oh, it's hard not to start sounding like, you know, in my day, the gatefold sleeve, but and it's changed now, you know. Music is now, it's not something that people hold the article.
It was a whole event of getting an album, getting your album home, putting it on, reading the bits and pieces, learning a bit about it. It was absolutely fantastic. And we lost that. And when we lost that, we lost an awful lot.
So welcome back to Days of Future Past. This is the home of Roger Dean, the artist who most successfully translated progressive rock's soundscapes into landscapes. He gave Yes their distinctive brand logo and imagined worlds that at the time still seemed like beautiful possibilities.
Whether you're designing just a box of matches, you're predicting one little teeny, minuscule part of the future. I think what's terribly astonishing and disappointing is how little of the promise of the future turned out. You know, in the 60s, people walked on the moon. In the 60s, there was colour television, you know, and no one has gone back to the moon. I think people would have been shocked if they could see the year 2008 from 1968 perspective, at how astonishingly little the world had improved compared to our ambitions and expectations. Had we planned it properly in the 60s, this is how it might have turned out. I try and find out what was motivating them to make the music and work on the same sort of ideas, if that was possible. It wasn't always possible, but sometimes it was. Sometimes there was a great synergy between the ideas that motivated the music making and the ideas that motivated the art. But it was not the music itself, it was the ideas behind it. I was lucky that the images and the music seemed to be an absolute perfect fit sometimes, when in actual fact the process was beyond analysis.
Yes, recording sessions were also moving beyond analysis. The hippie democracy the band chose as a way of life made for difficulties in the studio. Their fifth album, Close to the Edge, took over 3 months to perfect.
It took 3 months because Simon and Garfunkel had done Bridge Over Troubled Waters, which took 3 months. We heard this and we thought, well, by golly, our next record's going to take 3 months and a day if it kills us. So, of course, this is the infantile way we behaved. We took 3 months and a day.
We established a whole new vein of length of how long we play. So, yeah, we've got some musicianship. We've got a lot of writers in the band, because Bill wrote, you know, everybody wrote in the band.
You know, can I trade your idea for my idea? You've got 5 guys writing imagine 5 guys writing a book.
Steve said, well, I've got this silly little line that I've had lying around for ages going ding 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 doo 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 dum dum dum.
It was all horse trading, muscle power, strongest guy, thickest skin.
And Chris said, I've got this bass run. And that was it, really. And I went, anything else? Is that? He went, no, that's it.
And when we got to what turned out to be, for me, the high spot, which was Close to the Edge, really, I don't know how that record got made.
Okay. Some days we got in the rehearsal room after, like, you know, yesterday, got in the next day and said, does anybody remember how we went from the last verse into that? No.
And say, well, I want that bit on the end of that, but I don't want to do it in that key because it works nicely the way I play it on guitar on that. So they'd go, well, we'll have a cup of tea, Rick, you work out how we go from there to there.
We couldn't do a song in 5 minutes, and it went to 10 minutes on the Yes album, and we got to Close to the Edge and we thought, oh, this just isn't long enough. We can't, this is like a symphony.
those days there were 2 or 3 albums which weren't so good, getting you towards the winner, the one that the thing existed for, which was close to the edge. That's the moment you exist for in a rock group, and it's terrific. And you think, that's the cookie, that's the one right there. Done deal. I'm gone. I left then.
Bruford defected to the less sunny, less democratic regime of Robert Fripp's all-new King Crimson. In 1972, this was akin to going over the Berlin Wall into East Germany. No papers required, just extreme chops.
If everything you've heard about King Crimson is true, it's an absolutely terrifying place. Whatever you do before you join King Crimson, would you please not do it when you're in the band? You're required really to develop a new style, if you can, specifically for that group. The implication being that you would play in that way in King Crimson and in King Crimson alone. I mean, yes, it was an endless debate about should it be F natural in the bass with a G sharp on top from the organ, or should it be the other way around. In King Crimson, almost nothing was said. You're just supposed to know.
Robert Fripp was a purist. Unlike the Jimmy Pages of rock, he didn't brandish the guitar like a phallus. His was more like a probe, an instrument of science, not sex. And to use it properly, you had to sit down.
The very first few gigs we did, Robert didn't sit down. And he was very unhappy, because in rehearsals and everything, he'd have his stool and his thing, you know. That was how he'd been taught. And Robert's very strict about when Robert hasn't how it should be, that's how it should be. And so eventually we just had to get him a stool because he was sulking. And he was so happy on that stool. And Robert's not a gyrator now, I see. You know, he may be many things, but he's not a gyrator. And Robert's idea of sexy is to smile with his glasses. And
Fripp wasn't alone. Sexual energy, the very lifeblood of rock and roll, was conspicuously absent from the prog rock stage. Bands like Egg had enough on their hands just playing the complicated arpeggios.
Well, we weren't very sexy, and we regarded overt sexual display as extremely uncool. It was something rather humiliating to have to admit to, that we were actually trying to get into girls' knickers. I mean, we wouldn't admit to it. It was very duplicitous, very dishonest, but there you are. We certainly wouldn't do it on stage. I would have been completely unconvincing. Imagine me doing sort of pelvic thrusts on stage while playing in 25/8. No.
No sex on stage, and no sex backstage. All the groupies were at Led Zeppelin concerts, not waiting for progressive rock maestros to demonstrate the delights of the diminished chord.
the rock bands in America had groupies. We didn't really have any, and the pop stars had groupies. We wanted groupies too.
We never had any Egg groupies. We never had any groupies, girl groupies at all. No girls ever came round to the side of the stage after the gig. Sad, isn't it? But
No, I don't know. When we went to America, we had lots of groupies, by the dozens, because they loved our English accents, and they loved the fact we weren't sort of American rock stars, and we were something different and exotic to them. Hey, I love your English accent. You'll want to take a shower with us? What, both of you? Gosh.
Progressive rock audiences certainly weren't screamers. They were an infinitely patient lot. Too much yang, not enough yin.
What we started to realise was our audience are rather kind of nice and reserved people, you know.
You know, fishing hats, great coats, bunch of albums under the arm.
public school sixth formers wearing greatcoats.
Ugly-looking audience, you know.
Pipe and glasses, yeah. Beards and stuff we used to have.
It was very male-orientated. I would say in those days 95% of our audience were male.
Never used to have females come to see us.
Not many girls. All chaps, you know.
Lots of guys, no girls.
What is this, some kind of homo band, or what is it?
There was the odd woman, mostly dragged along, who just used to look bewildered.
If the sexiness of 60s psychedelia was absent from the prog performance, theatricality, used so effectively by Arthur Brown, was becoming an essential part of any Genesis show.
A flower.
I mean, initially it started off really in many ways because the PA systems we had, you know, which was only the voice went through the PA in those days, were pretty bad, so you could never really hear any lyrics. And we had quite complex lyrics, and the lyrics was quite important. So Peter sort of felt he had to sort of act them out a bit, so he started acting it out a bit on stage.
The prog rock movement really stimulated the visual aspect as well as the playing and the conceptual side. The visual thing was now, theatre was important. Started with that kind of psychedelia period, Arthur Brown, wherever, and went on and got developed.
Progressive rock now had such a loyal male record-buying fan base that both the major and independent labels happily signed new bands and let them record whatever they wanted. They weren't even expected to make money at first. This was the age of company investment and artistic freedom. Egg recorded all their albums with zero interference.
They were interested in us because I think they thought we sounded a bit like the Nice, who had already had a chart hit, and they thought, well, you know, maybe these guys can make us some money, so they signed us up. But we had no input from them at all. I don't think we spoke to any Deccan executive ever.
I don't quite know why we got away with it, to be honest, you know, but that was the style then. I mean, we used to just, for some reason, we set the precedent that we'd make an album, when it's finished, we'd hand it over to the record label. I mean, how nice is that? You know, this is the album.
We were still allowed to do what we wanted to do by the record companies and management. We were still allowed to come up with ridiculous ideas and then somehow find people who could make it happen.
Until groups like Yes, a song was taken and played. The guitarist played the chords, the bass player played the roots, the drummer played the rhythm, and the singer sang the song. Yes said, no, we don't want to do it like that. We want to have a theme to start. We want to have a riff behind the song. We want to take out the chords of that section, because everybody's heard those before. Stick some lines in. More like an orchestral approach. You know, violins do this, the bassoon does that. You know, it's a bit like a thinking man's music, as opposed to a, you know, sort of like just from the gut music, you know, which rock was just really from the gut, I think.
Everybody was looking for, eagerly to see what was new, what was going to happen. And that was definitely a heady time, for sure, and one that I rather suspect we won't see again. 72, 73, we were in that kind of prog rock camp. Albeit we were the band that were making a joke of it. We were doing a bit of a send-up of prog rock for a couple of albums back then.
Despite Jethro Tull's determination to remain outside the prog rock establishment, their fourth album, Aqualung, seemed suspiciously profound.
It was not a concept album, but people just ignored it. This concept album, it's got a picture on